The Galactic Defense Academy's training ground stretched across 3 kilometers of reinforced durasteel, its surface scarred by decades of combat exercises. Towering energy barriers hummed with power, creating practice zones where cadets from 12 different species honed their skills. The morning air carried the sharp scent of ozone from discharged weapons and the metallic tang of sweat from various alien physiologies. Cadet Marcus Chen adjusted his training vest and checked his pulse rifle's charge indicator. Around him, his squad mates prepared for another round of combat simulation. The Zephyrian beside him, Castel, flexed his 4 arms and tested his weapon's weight distribution. His blue-scaled hide gleamed under the artificial lighting, and his compound eyes tracked multiple targets simultaneously. "Today's scenario involves urban warfare," announced Instructor Vexahai, her chitinous voice carrying across the training ground. The insectoid hive queen descendant stood 3 meters tall, her presence commanding respect from every cadet. "You will face quantum rifle fire, ion grenades, and neural scramblers. These weapons are set to training intensity, but I warn you, training intensity can still cause serious injury or unconsciousness." Marcus nodded along with the others. He'd been at the academy for 6 months now, and while he'd proven competent in tactics and marksmanship, he knew many of his alien classmates still viewed humans with curiosity and mild skepticism. Humans were new to the galactic community, having only achieved faster-than-light travel 15 years ago. Most species had millennia of spacefaring experience. The crystalline cadet Zithara chimed softly, her translucent body refracting the overhead lights into rainbow patterns. "The neural scramblers concern me most. Even at training intensity, they can cause memory disruption lasting several days." "That's why we train," rumbled Thorak, a massive granite skin whose stone-like hide could deflect most small arms fire. His species had evolved on a high-gravity world where falling rocks were a daily hazard. Pain teaches caution. Caution keeps you alive. Marcus found himself grouped with Castel, Zithara, a voidwalker named Shendu whose shadow-like form seemed to absorb light, and a plasma heart called Feltara whose internal furnace glowed visible through her semi-transparent skin. They were designated as Blue Squad for this exercise. The training scenario placed them in a mock city district, complete with multi-story buildings, narrow alleys, and civilian zones they had to avoid hitting. Their mission: neutralize a terrorist cell holding hostages in the central tower. The opposing force consisted of senior cadets and automated defense systems. "Remember," Castel said as they approached their assigned entrance, "humans are known for tactical thinking and adaptability. We'll rely on your strategic insights, Marcus." Marcus appreciated the confidence, though he wondered if it was entirely deserved. Human combat doctrine was still being integrated into galactic military thinking. "Let's move. Stay low and watch for crossfire." They entered the mock city through a damaged storefront. Immediately, the sounds of simulated combat echoed from deeper in the complex. Red Squad was already engaging the enemy from the north entrance, their energy weapons lighting up the artificial twilight. The first obstacle came quickly. A quantum rifle nest had been established in a second-story window, covering the main avenue they needed to cross. Quantum rifles fired compressed energy packets that could penetrate most armor and cause severe neural disruption on impact. "Zithara, can you refract their targeting systems?" Marcus asked. The crystalline cadet's body shifted, bending light around herself until she became nearly invisible. "I can provide cover, but only for 30 seconds before my cellular structure overheats." "That's enough. Shendu, shadow step to that building across the street and provide covering fire. The rest of us will rush the rifle nest when they're suppressed." The plan worked perfectly for the first phase. Zithara's light bending confused the rifle's targeting system, while Shendu's void-touched energy bolts forced the gunners to take cover. Marcus, Castell, and Feltara sprinted across the avenue, their boots pounding on the artificial street surface. They were halfway across when everything went wrong. A hidden neural scrambler activated from a basement position they hadn't detected. The invisible psychic pulse hit all three runners simultaneously. Neural scramblers worked by overloading the nervous system, causing immediate collapse and temporary paralysis in most species. Feltara dropped first, her plasma heart flickering as her body went limp. Castell managed 2 more steps before crashing to the ground, his forearms twitching uncontrollably. Both cadets lay motionless, their consciousness scattered by the neural assault. Marcus felt the scrambler hit him like a sledgehammer to the skull. The psychic pulse tore through his nervous system, setting every nerve ending ablaze with confused signals. His vision exploded into static, his inner ear screamed conflicting balance information, and his muscles received a dozen different movement commands simultaneously. Any normal cadet would have collapsed instantly. The neural scrambler's training setting was specifically calibrated to incapacitate without causing permanent damage, but incapacitation was still the expected result. Marcus stumbled but kept moving. From the Overwatch position, Instructor Vex High's compound eyes widened in surprise. Her enhanced vision tracked the human cadet as he shook his head once, hard, and continued his charge toward the rifle nest. Impossible, she chittered to herself. Her instruments clearly showed the neural scrambler had fired at full training intensity. At that level, even a granite skin would be down for several minutes. In the rifle nest, the 2 senior cadets operating the quantum rifle stared in disbelief. They'd watched the human take a direct neural scrambler hit. They'd seen his stride falter and his head snap back from the impact. But instead of falling like his squad mates, he was still coming. If anything, he looked angry. "Fire!" shouted the quantum gunner, a reptilian Sisk with excellent reflexes. The quantum rifle discharged its compressed energy packet directly at Marcus's center mass. Quantum rounds were designed to disrupt molecular cohesion on impact, causing immediate unconsciousness through cellular shock. At training intensity, they merely caused severe pain and temporary paralysis. The round hit Marcus square in the chest. Blue energy crackled across his training vest as the quantum field disrupted his body's electrical system. The impact should have thrown him backward and left him twitching on the ground for at least 10 minutes. Marcus grunted, stumbled backward 2 steps, and kept coming. "What is he?" whispered the rifle operator's spotter, a nervous hive descendant whose antennae were vibrating with fear. Marcus reached the building and kicked in the door. His chest ached where the quantum round had hit, and his head still throbbed from the neural scrambler, but he functioned. The pain was significant but manageable, like a bad headache and a stomach punch combined. The 2 senior cadets in the rifle nest heard boots pounding up the stairs. They abandoned their position and fled toward the building's rear exit, unwilling to face whatever the human had become. "Blue Squad leader to all units," Marcus spoke into his comm unit, his voice steady despite the double hit he'd absorbed. "Marcus here. Feltara and Castell are down from a neural scrambler. I've neutralized the quantum rifle position. Zith Ara, Shendu, advance to the next checkpoint. I'll cover our fallen team members until medical arrives." Across the training ground, cadets from other species had stopped their own exercises to stare. Word spread quickly through the communication networks. The human had taken a neural scrambler hit and a quantum rifle round within seconds of each other and was still operational. Instructor Vexahai activated her emergency protocols and glided across the training ground on her 6 legs. She needed to examine this cadet immediately. Her instruments had recorded everything, but the readings seemed impossible. By the time she reached the position, Marcus was kneeling beside his unconscious squad mates, checking their vital signs with practiced efficiency. His training vest showed scorch marks from the quantum impact, and neural activity sensors indicated he'd definitely been hit by the scrambler, but he was alert and functional. "Cadet Chen," Vexhai announced, her voice carrying harmonics of confusion and scientific curiosity. Please remain where you are. I need to run medical scans. Marcus looked up at the towering instructor. Ma'am, Feltara and Castell need attention first. They took the full scrambler hit and haven't regained consciousness. Medical teams are already responding to them, she assured him, producing a handheld scanner that hummed with activity as she pointed it at Marcus. I need to understand what just occurred. According to my instruments, you absorbed neural and quantum impacts that should have incapacitated you. I got hit pretty hard, Marcus admitted, rubbing his chest where the quantum round had struck. But I've had worse during human military training. Pain doesn't stop you unless you let it. Vexhi's scanner chirped with incoming data. Marcus's neural patterns showed definite disruption from the scrambler. The psychic attack had definitely affected him. Cellular analysis indicated quantum field exposure consistent with a direct quantum rifle hit. Yet his cognitive functions remained normal, and his physical coordination showed only minor impairment. This is unprecedented, she murmured, her scientific mind racing. In 40 years of instruction, I have never seen a cadet continue fighting after absorbing both neural and quantum impacts. Maybe humans are just stubborn, Marcus suggested with a slight smile. My old drill sergeant used to say pain is just weakness leaving the body. Other instructors began arriving, drawn by reports of the incident. Senior instructor Malthus, an elderly void walker whose experience spanned multiple conflicts, materialized beside Vexhi like condensing shadow. I observed from the tactical center, Malthus said, his voice like distant thunder. The human's response defies standard physiological expectations. We must investigate this phenomenon. Medical teams had arrived and were loading Feltara and Castell onto grav stretchers. Both cadets were regaining consciousness slowly, their neurological systems still scrambled but recovering. They would be fine within a few hours. Marcus stood and dusted off his training gear. Sir, if the exercise is continuing, Blue Squad still has a mission to complete. Vexhi and Malthus exchanged glances that conveyed volumes. The human's casual attitude toward what should have been debilitating injuries raised questions that went far beyond a single training exercise. The exercise is concluded for your squad, Vexhi decided. I want comprehensive medical and psychological evaluations run immediately. This incident requires investigation. As medical technicians approached with their scanners and samples kits, Marcus realized his simple training day had become something much more significant. Around the training ground, cadets from a dozen species watched him with new interest and no small amount of concern. He'd absorbed hits that would floor most sentient beings and walked away. Now everyone wanted to know how. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the academy grounds as news of the incident spread. In dormitories and mess halls, cadets discussed what they'd witnessed. Some called it impossible. Others whispered that humans might be more dangerous than anyone had realized. Marcus found himself at the center of attention he'd never wanted, his simple demonstration of human resilience, about to reshape how the galaxy viewed his entire species. The Academy's medical center buzzed with activity as 3 different species of doctors examined every inch of Marcus Chen's physiology. The human cadet sat patiently on an examination table that had been adjusted for his bipedal frame, surrounded by scanning equipment that hummed and clicked with alien efficiency. Dr. Yithmol, the facility's chief medical officer, studied the readouts with 4 eyes while her assistant, a crystalline-formed healer named Pure Light, channeled diagnostic energy through Marcus's nervous system. The Zephyrian doctor's scaled hands moved in complex patterns as she interpreted the data streaming across her screens. Remarkable, Dr. Yithmol muttered, her tail twitching with scientific excitement. The neural pathways showed definite scrambling from the psychic attack, yet consciousness remained intact. And these cellular readings... She paused, double-checking her instruments. Pure Light, are you certain your scanners are calibrated correctly? The crystalline healer's form chimed melodically. All instruments function within normal parameters, Doctor. The human's cellular structure shows quantum field exposure consistent with direct quantum rifle impact, yet no cellular collapse occurred. The energy was absorbed and dispersed through unknown mechanisms. Marcus watched their confusion with growing unease. Is something wrong with me? Wrong? Dr. Yithmol's laugh was like wind chimes in a storm. Child, you may represent the most significant physiological discovery in the past century. Your species' durability appears to exceed our most optimistic projections by several orders of magnitude. The examination room's door hissed open, admitting Instructor Vexhai along with several Academy senior staff. Behind them walked a figure Marcus had only seen in holographic briefings, Admiral Cathara of the Galactic Defense Council, her iridescent carapace marking her as one of the ancient Hive Queen lineage. Doctor, what have you discovered? The Admiral's voice carried harmonics of authority that made the air itself seem to vibrate. Dr. Yithmol gestured to her displays. Admiral, this cadet's physiological responses challenge our fundamental understanding of neural and quantum impacts. According to our readings, he should have been unconscious for hours, yet he maintained full combat effectiveness. Admiral Cathara approached the examination table, her compound eyes studying Marcus with intense interest. Cadet Chen, I've reviewed the incident recordings. Your performance was unprecedented. I just did what my training taught me, ma'am, Marcus replied. Human soldiers are trained to fight through pain and disorientation. But this transcends mere training, Vexhai interjected. I've overseen combat instruction for 4 decades. No species maintains cognitive function after simultaneous neural and quantum attacks. The physiological impossibility. Perhaps, the Admiral interrupted. The impossibility lies in our assumptions rather than the cadet's abilities. She turned back to Marcus. Tell me about human military conditioning. How do your warriors prepare for combat stress? Marcus considered the question carefully. We learned that pain is temporary, but mission failure can be permanent. Human soldiers train in extreme conditions, sleep deprivation, physical exhaustion, psychological pressure. We're taught that your body will quit long before your mind has to. Pure Light's crystalline form pulsed with curiosity. Your species deliberately subjects itself to suffering for preparation purposes? Not suffering exactly, Marcus corrected. Stress inoculation. We expose ourselves to controlled hardship so that real hardship doesn't break us. Every human military trains this way. It's been our doctrine for thousands of years. Dr. Yithmol's tail stopped twitching as comprehension dawned. You're describing systematic neural conditioning. Your species has unknowingly developed resistance to psychic attacks through deliberate exposure to extreme stress. And the quantum resistance? Admiral Cathara asked. Possibly related to human cellular structure, Pure Light chimed. Their DNA shows unusual redundancy patterns. Where most species have single-point vulnerabilities, humans appear to have multiple backup systems. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Admiral Cathara's antennae twitched, a sign of deep thought among her people. Cadet Chen, she said finally, I'm authorizing expanded testing. With your permission, we'd like to understand the full extent of human resilience capabilities. What kind of testing, ma'am? Combat scenarios beyond normal Academy parameters. We need to establish human baseline tolerances for various weapon systems and environmental stresses. This information could be crucial for future military integration. Marcus nodded slowly. If it helps the war effort, I'm willing. 3 hours later, Marcus found himself in Testing Complex 7, a facility normally used for equipment evaluation rather than biological studies. The complex could simulate various planetary environments and weapon effects while maintaining complete safety controls. Joining him was a team of volunteer observers from different species, each interested in understanding human capabilities from their own perspective. Castell had insisted on participating despite still recovering from his neural scrambler exposure. "You saved our mission today," the Zephyrian said, flexing his 4 arms to work out lingering stiffness. "I want to understand how." Also present was Thorak, the massive granite skin whose own species was renowned for physical durability. "My people evolved on a world of falling mountains," he rumbled. "Yet even we would struggle with what you endured." The first test involved graduated neural scrambler exposure. Dr. Yithmol monitored Marcus's brain activity while slowly increasing the psychic intensity from training level toward combat power. "Mild discomfort at 20% combat intensity," Marcus reported through his comlink. "Some visual distortion, but manageable." The observers exchanged glances. 20% combat intensity would render most species unconscious. 30%, Dr. Yithmol announced. "Headache building," Marcus replied. "Balance slightly affected, but I can still move normally." At 50% combat intensity, a level that would kill most unprotected minds, Marcus began showing significant stress indicators, but remained conscious and functional. "That's enough neural testing," Dr. Yithmol declared. "Any higher risks permanent damage." The quantum resistance tests proved equally remarkable. Marcus absorbed direct quantum rifle hits at progressively higher intensities, each impact that should have resulted in cellular collapse, instead causing temporary pain and minimal impairment. "Your cellular structure disperses quantum energy like water flowing around a stone," Pure Light observed. "The energy passes through with minimal structural damage." Admiral Cathara watched from the observation deck, her ancient mind processing implications that reached far beyond simple combat applications. "Doctor, could this resistance be enhanced through training?" "Theoretically, yes. If human neural conditioning can be improved through exposure, their natural resilience might be similarly developed." The testing continued into the evening. Marcus endured sonic attacks that would shatter crystalline beings, survived atmospheric pressures that would crush most species, and maintained cognitive function through sensory deprivation that typically caused psychological breakdown. With each test, the observers grew more amazed and more concerned. "He's not just tough," Castell whispered to Thorak. "He's processing all of this like it's routine discomfort." The granite skin nodded gravely. "My species prides itself on endurance, but we would show pain, show strain. The human acts as though severe injury is merely inconvenience." During a break between tests, Marcus overheard fragments of conversation among the research team. "Implications for military doctrine are staggering. If all humans show similar resistance, we may have underestimated their species significantly." Dr. Yithmol approached him with a nutrition bar and hydration fluid designed for human physiology. "Cadet, how do you feel about these tests?" Marcus accepted the refreshments gratefully. "Honestly, it feels like advanced training. Challenging, but nothing I can't handle." "That attitude may be as important as your physical capabilities," she observed. "Your species treats severe stress as normal operational parameters. We have a saying, embrace the suck. If you accept that missions will involve hardship, you can focus on completing objectives instead of avoiding discomfort." Pure Light materialized beside them, her crystalline form reflecting the chamber's lights. "This philosophy is alien to most species. We typically avoid unnecessary suffering." "But necessity is subjective," Marcus pointed out. "What seems unnecessary to you might be essential preparation to us." Admiral Cathara's voice echoed through the complex's communication system. "Cadet Chen, report to the observation deck. We need to discuss the implications of today's findings." Marcus made his way to the elevated platform where Academy leadership had gathered. The weight of their collective attention was almost physical. multiple species studying him like a specimen that had evolved beyond their understanding. Your test results will require significant policy revisions, Admiral Cathara began. Human integration into galactic defense forces was planned to occur gradually over decades. These findings suggest acceleration may be necessary. Ma'am? War is coming, Cadet. Our intelligence indicates the Devourers have begun mobilizing beyond the void barrier. When that conflict arrives, beings who can survive their weapons while remaining functional may be the difference between victory and extinction. The room's atmosphere grew heavy with unspoken implications. Marcus realized his simple demonstration of durability had revealed something that went far beyond individual capability. We'll need to test other humans immediately, Instructor Vexhai added. If your resilience is species-wide rather than individual mutation, our entire strategic planning must be reconsidered. There's more, Dr. Yithmal said, consulting her data pad. Cadet Chen's cellular regeneration rates are also accelerated. Damage that would require days to heal in most species appears to resolve in hours for humans. Marcus touched his chest where the quantum round had hit. The soreness was already fading, replaced by nothing more than mild tenderness. How many humans are currently enrolled at the Academy? Admiral Cathara asked. 12, Vexhai replied. We were conducting gradual integration assessment. Expand that to 1,200 as quickly as possible. I want comprehensive testing of human capabilities across all military disciplines. As the meeting continued, Marcus found himself wondering how his simple training exercise had led to such momentous decisions. Around him, the galaxy's military leadership was restructuring their entire understanding of human potential based on his ability to walk off injuries that would cripple others. Outside the testing complex, night had fallen across the Academy grounds. In dormitories throughout the facility, cadets from dozens of species discussed the day's revelations in hushed tones. The humans, they realized, were not just new arrivals to be gradually integrated. They might be the galaxy's secret weapon against an enemy none of them fully understood yet. The emergency klaxons shrieked across the Academy at 0347 hours, jolting every cadet from sleep with their piercing wail. Marcus rolled from his bunk with practiced efficiency, grabbing his gear as emergency lighting bathed the dormitory in harsh red. Around him, his alien roommates struggled to orient themselves in the chaos. All cadets to emergency stations, Admiral Cathara's voice boomed through the communication system. This is not a drill. Hostile forces have breached the outer defense grid. Academy Protocol 7 is now in effect. Marcus's Zephyrian roommate, Telvash, was still fumbling with his equipment harness. Protocol 7 means evacuation, doesn't it? No. Marcus replied grimly, checking his weapon's charge. Protocol 7 means the Academy is under direct attack, and civilian evacuation is impossible. We fight here. Through the dormitory's reinforced windows, explosions lit the pre-dawn darkness. The Academy's orbital defense platforms were engaging something in the upper atmosphere, their energy beams creating brilliant streaks against the starfield. Marcus sprinted toward the assembly point, joined by streams of cadets from every species in the Academy. The scene in the main courtyard was controlled chaos, instructors shouting orders, senior cadets organizing defensive positions, and the constant thunder of weapons fire from the Academy's automated defenses. Instructor Vexahai spotted Marcus in the crowd and gestured urgently. Cadet Chen, report to Command Complex 7 immediately. You're needed for special assignment. Marcus pushed through the crowd, noting how many of his fellow cadets looked terrified. Most had never experienced real combat, and the Academy's peaceful routine hadn't prepared them for actual warfare. The command complex was a hive of frantic activity. Holographic displays showed the tactical situation in real time. Multiple Devourer ships had somehow penetrated the void barrier and launched a surprise assault on the Academy. The alien vessels moved like living shadows, their biomechanical hulls defying conventional sensors. Admiral Cathara stood at the center of the complex, her compound eyes tracking dozens of data streams simultaneously. Cadet Chen, your timing is perfect. We have a critical situation. She gestured to a tactical display showing the Academy's lower levels. The Devourers have deployed terror weapons into our underground facilities. These devices generate psychic fields designed to incapacitate all higher life forms through overwhelming fear and neural disruption. Marcus studied the display. How overwhelming are we talking about, ma'am? Complete psychological collapse within minutes of exposure, Dr. Yithmol answered, appearing beside them with her medical scanner. The devices target the fear centers of the brain directly. No known species can resist their effects. Except possibly humans, Admiral Cathara continued. Based on yesterday's testing, your neural resistance might allow you to function in areas where others would be catatonic with terror. The tactical display showed red zones spreading through the Academy's sublevels. In those areas, dozens of cadets and staff were trapped, alive but helpless, overwhelmed by artificially induced fear so intense their minds simply shut down. We need someone to reach the reactor control room, the Admiral explained. The Devourers are trying to overload our power core. If they succeed, the explosion will destroy everything within 50 kilometers, including the civilian settlements. Marcus understood immediately. You need me to walk through a terror weapon field to reach the controls. It's a suicide mission for anyone else, Vexhai added. Even our bravest warriors become paralyzed children when exposed to devourer fear tactics. But your species' stress conditioning might provide enough resistance. Might. We don't know, Admiral Cathara admitted. This is uncharted territory. Terror weapons represent the Devourer's most effective psychological warfare tool. They've never failed before. Marcus looked at the display showing trapped personnel in the lower levels. Among them, he recognized several instructors who'd helped train him, fellow cadets he'd shared meals with, and support staff whose only crime was working at the galaxy's premier military academy. What's the time frame? Reactor overload in 90 minutes, reported the tactical officer, a nervous hive descendant whose antennae were vibrating with stress. The containment fields are already showing instability. Marcus picked up a heavy-duty radiation suit designed for emergency reactor work. I'll need directions to the control room and whatever protection you can give me. The suit will protect against radiation and environmental hazards, but it won't help with the psychic assault, Dr. Yithmol warned. Terror weapons attack the mind directly. Physical armor is useless. Then I'll have to rely on mental armor, Marcus replied, sealing the suit's helmet. Humans have been dealing with fear for a long time. The journey to the sublevels took Marcus through corridors he'd walked hundreds of times during his academy tenure. Now they felt alien and threatening, emergency lighting casting strange shadows that seemed to move independently. The deeper he went, the more the air itself seemed to thicken with malevolent presence. At sublevel 5, Marcus encountered his first terror weapon effect. The sensation hit him like a physical blow, pure, undiluted fear that bypassed rational thought and struck directly at the primitive parts of his brain. Images flooded his mind. Childhood nightmares given form, imagined threats becoming reality. Every phobia he'd ever suppressed suddenly manifested. For most beings, this would be the end. The terror weapon's psychic assault was designed to trigger complete mental shutdown, leaving victims conscious but unable to act, lost in their own personalized hell of infinite fear. Marcus paused, gritted his teeth, and pushed forward. The terror was real and overwhelming, but his human training had prepared him for this without anyone realizing it. Every grueling exercise he'd endured, every moment of pushing through exhaustion and pain, every drill instructor who'd screamed that fear was just another enemy to defeat, it all came together into a foundation of mental resilience. Fear is temporary, he muttered through clenched teeth, repeating words from his basic training. Mission is permanent. At sublevel 7, the psychic assault intensified. Marcus began seeing things that weren't there. Devourer creatures stalking him through the corridors, walls bleeding, floors opening into bottomless pits. His hands shook, his breathing became ragged, and sweat poured down his face despite the suit's climate control. But he kept walking. Through his suit's communication system, he could hear the mounting panic in the command complex. Reactor containment down to 60%. Overload in 47 minutes. Marcus reached sub-level 9, where the terror weapon effects reached their peak intensity. Here, he found the first victims, a crystalline instructor and 2 granite-skinned cadets lying motionless on the floor, their eyes open but their minds trapped in endless horror. Their bodies showed no physical damage, but they were as helpless as if they'd been shot. The fear effects here were so intense that Marcus had to stop and lean against the wall, fighting waves of artificial terror that threatened to overwhelm even his conditioned resistance. His vision blurred, his heart pounded, and every instinct screamed at him to run. Instead, he forced himself to remember his purpose. Thousands of lives depended on reaching the reactor controls. The cadets lying helpless around him were counting on someone who could function despite the psychic assault. "Reactor containment down to 30%, came the urgent update. 23 minutes to overload. Marcus stumbled into the reactor control room, his hands shaking so badly he could barely operate the control interface. The terror weapon's influence was strongest here. Waves of psychic fear so intense they felt like physical blows. Around the room, the facility's engineering staff lay collapsed, their minds shattered by exposure to pure terror. The reactor display showed critical warnings flashing across every screen. The Devourer attack had corrupted the safety protocols, sending the core toward an uncontrolled energy release that would vaporize everything for kilometers. Marcus's training at the academy had included basic reactor operation, but the emergency procedures were complex and required precise timing. Working while under psychic assault that had disabled every other being made the task nearly impossible. His hands fumbled with the controls as waves of artificial fear tried to convince him that touching anything would result in immediate death. The terror weapon fed him visions of reactor explosions, radiation poisoning, and countless other horrible fates if he made any mistakes. "Containment down to 15%, the communication system announced. 12 minutes to overload. Marcus closed his eyes and forced himself to focus on the technical procedures rather than the psychic assault. Step by step, he began the emergency shutdown sequence, each action requiring enormous willpower to overcome the artificial terror flooding his mind. The first safety protocol activated successfully. The reactor's primary feed began reducing power output, but the process was too slow. He needed to manually engage the emergency coolant systems and realign the containment field generators, procedures that required perfect coordination while his mind was under constant psychic attack. 5 minutes to overload, came the increasingly desperate updates from above. Marcus's hands were steadier now. Somewhere in the depths of his concentration, he'd found a core of human stubbornness that even Devourer terror weapons couldn't shake. The fear was still there, overwhelming and constant, but it had become background noise to his determination. The coolant systems engaged with a satisfying hum. Containment field alignment required delicate adjustments to 17 different generators, each one calibrated to precise specifications, while alarms screamed and artificial terror tried to convince him that each control he touched would kill everyone in the academy. 2 minutes to overload. The final field generator snapped into alignment. Marcus slammed his hand down on the emergency stabilization control, engaging every safety system simultaneously. The reactor's angry red warnings began shifting to amber, then yellow, then blessed green as the containment fields stabilized and power output dropped to safe levels. "Reactor stable," he reported through his communication system. his voice hoarse from the strain of fighting constant terror. "Crisis contained." The response from the command complex was immediate and jubilant. Through his helmet speakers, Marcus could hear cheering from multiple species as the tactical displays showed the reactor threat neutralized. But the terror weapons were still active, and dozens of Academy personnel remained trapped in psychic paralysis throughout the lower levels. Marcus realized his work wasn't finished. Over the next hour, he methodically searched each sub-level, locating and destroying the terror weapon devices that were keeping his fellow cadets and instructors helpless. Each device required him to endure concentrated fear effects while dismantling alien technology, but his human resilience allowed him to function where others would have collapsed. When the final terror weapon was destroyed, the psychic assault vanished like a broken fever. Throughout the sub-levels, trapped personnel began recovering, their minds slowly clearing from the artificial nightmare that had held them prisoner. Marcus emerged from the sub-levels to find the Academy's main courtyard filled with cheering cadets and faculty. The Devourer ships had retreated when their terror weapons failed, apparently unprepared for any species that could resist their primary weapon. Admiral Cathara approached him as he removed his radiation helmet, her compound eyes reflecting something that might have been awe. "Cadet Chen, you've just demonstrated why humans may be the key to winning this war. The Devourers have never encountered a species that could function under terror weapon assault." "I was just doing my job, ma'am," Marcus replied, though the exhaustion of fighting constant psychic terror was finally catching up to him. "Your job was to survive the Academy's training program," she corrected. "What you accomplished today was save thousands of lives through capabilities your species didn't even know it possessed." Around them, cadets from dozens of species looked at Marcus with newfound respect and understanding. The human who had walked off injuries that would floor most beings had proven that human resilience went far beyond physical durability. Dr. Yithmol approached with her ever-present scanner, checking Marcus for psychological damage from prolonged terror weapon exposure. "Remarkable," she murmured, studying the readings. "Definite stress indicators, but no lasting neural damage. You experienced the full psychic assault and maintained cognitive function throughout." "How?" asked Castell, who had been among the rescued cadets from sub-level 5. "The fear was so intense I couldn't even think. How did you continue functioning?" Marcus considered the question carefully. Human military doctrine teaches that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done despite being afraid. I was terrified the entire time, but the mission was more important than the fear. Instructor Vexhai nodded approvingly. That mindset may be humanity's greatest weapon against the Devourers. They rely on psychological warfare because most species become helpless when confronted with overwhelming fear. But humans? Humans embrace the suck, Marcus finished with a tired smile. As dawn broke over the Academy, emergency repair crews worked to restore damaged systems, while xenobiologists studied the captured terror weapon technology. The Devourer attack had failed, but it had revealed something far more valuable than any intelligence about enemy capabilities. It had shown that humans possessed natural resistance to the galaxy's most feared weapons, and that resistance might be the key to survival in the war that was coming. In the weeks that followed, human enrollment at the Academy would expand exponentially. The galaxy's military leaders had discovered that sometimes the most powerful weapon wasn't superior technology or advanced tactics. Sometimes it was simply the stubborn refusal to quit when everyone else would have given up. Marcus returned to his regular training schedule, but now with the knowledge that his species' greatest contribution to galactic defense might be their capacity to walk through hell and keep going. After all, as any human warrior could have told them, sometimes taking a hit and walking on was exactly what the mission required.